Good to
All
be
right.
with you.
Any minute now, President Trump will greet Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House. The two will head to the Oval Office for a meeting to discuss ending Russia's war against Kiev. Zelenskyy will be flanked by European leaders. They arrived last hour. Today's meeting comes just days after the Alaska summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump has called on Zelenskyy to give up on Crimea and NATO membership, and reportedly, Putin is demanding several land swaps in eastern Ukraine. Here is U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff.
We agreed on much more robust security guarantees. The United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. We are a whole lot closer to eliminating death on the battlefield in Ukraine and Russia.
Okay, so Brian, we've been debating,
Yeah.
And there's a debate going on. Is this whole process from Friday to today a lot of nothing, or is it a lot of something? How do you read it from your perch?
Yeah, well, one thing I've learned about Washington, D.C. is you can't believe anything they say publicly. So whatever's going on behind closed doors, we don't know. I think we know the general outlines, but we have two choices. Either we're committed to fighting a war against Russia, or we have to convince the rest of the world to give in. And maybe in the press, it'll be touted as a Putin victory. But in the end, he's the one who invaded. And if we're not willing to fight that war, then this is the way things are going to turn out. And what I hope is that in the long run, you go back to World War II, Russia and the United States, we had our philosophical differences, big ones, but we worked together. And I think if we can work closer with Russia in the years ahead, that kind of isolates China a little bit, and we get something out of this in the long run that's positive for our future.
Dagan, I go to you on that because you have repeatedly talked about this sort of dance between the United States and Russia and China. And Russia and China have been much closer partners in recent years. I think you've rightly pointed out, President Trump wants to get in the middle of that. He actually wants to pull Russia away from China. And that is happening. That is working in the background of everything that's going on here with Ukraine.
There's some of that. If you want to pull the two apart, I'm thinking about it in terms of additional sanctions that could be put in place if things do not go the way of ending this war, because there's a lot of room for the United States and these European partners to move in terms of truly crushing Russia's economy. And Russia's economy is, the West is at the point now because of the falling oil revenue, the rising budget deficit, double-digit interest rates, double-digit inflation. I could go on. The banking system is beginning to really fall apart. Second largest bank, core lending operation, collapsed right before Putin agreed to this, VTB, at the meeting in Alaska, before he agreed to that. So we can, at the West, can squeeze, if we want to force Putin to end this. These are logical next steps. Putin, in the meeting, I'm assuming, he made an offer. This is what will be discussed and presented to Zelenskyy. He has to decide how to respond, and also will be discussed the security guarantees. How does that take shape? It's not within NATO, but these will be certainly Article 5, like security guarantees, plus the United States. But Russia's in such grave shape now, it's leaning on North Korea, of all places. And China's economy is also slowing dramatically. So, so if you can peel them away from each other, ultimately, I think that's better for world and world peace, if you want to use that phrase. But I don't know if that's kind of way far out and down the road, perhaps.
Jerry.
Well, continuing your thought process there. So imagine you're sitting in the Kremlin right now and you're looking at all of Europe gathering at the White House and Zelensky. How are you feeling about that? You've got to feel a little pressured, right? Because at this point, I think I'm becoming more hopeful as I watch this and I see Europe get together, come to the White House, Zelensky coming to the White House. I'm going to be watching some things like, will Zelensky show respect? Will he show up in a suit? Is his demeanor going to be different from last time around? We're going to see. But I really think we're in a position where something good could come of this. I'm much more optimistic, certainly, than the mainstream media.
John, you know, there's a lot made about how Trump and Putin greeted one another on the red carpet. The fact that the president of the United States was willing to meet with Putin. Some have said Putin should be a pariah on the world stage. You shouldn't meet with people like him. Trump's willing to do that. And in fact, he's gone further and talked about, let's stay with economics for a second, the opportunity to work with Russia economically. Okay, so Dagan mentioned you could squeeze Russia, but you could also extend a hand to them. We know where you stand in terms of, and rightfully so, on what Putin's done in this war. Is it a mistake for the President of the United States to say there could be an open hand here if Putin does something differently?
It is not a mistake for Trump to go ahead and welcome Putin to Alaska, you know, to try to achieve a peace agreement. You've got, if you want to end this conflict, you have to give Putin some sort of exit ramp. That's of the utmost importance. Otherwise, an agreement will never happen. But I think the most important thing is once you get the peace agreement, it has to be strong enough so that you very much minimize any risk that Russia at some point in the future will try to invade Ukraine all over again, try to take over the entirety of Ukraine. This peace agreement has to be strong enough so that it will deter Russian aggression in the future, not only with Ukraine, but perhaps with other parts of Eastern Europe, you know, for that matter. And the other question that I think about sometimes is, what about the cost of rebuilding Ukraine? Where's that money going to come from? Okay, there's a lot of damaged buildings, destroyed cities. Who's going to pay for that? Will Russia pay for that in part? Will there be some sort of tax placed on Russian oil revenues to help fund the rebuilding of Ukraine?
A reparations sort of
yeah,
conversation that you're having. It strikes me that a real estate building president would be much more eager to have that conversation if you got to the point where you had a ceasefire. How do we rebuild? But the American public, we're talking about these robust security backstops, okay? Right. And the Europeans would sort of maybe be the front stop on that. Maybe the U.S. would be a backstop. But the U.S. public, for a long time, has been very skeptical about being involved in this space. Better for Europe to be involved than us. This conversation, though, is happening about these, Dagan mentioned them, not NATO, but NATO-like guarantees. Is there a growing will in the United States for us to be involved in this way, do you think, right now, Brian?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think that's what, you know, President Trump uses the word all the time. Peace. I want peace, 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 not war. And if we were to backstop this by saying we will go to war if you do this again, that's a direct challenge to Putin if he thinks there's a challenge to Russia. And I don't want to disagree with Dagan directly on this. I believe the sanctions.
No, you can disagree with me.
Well, I think the sanctions are working in many respects, but think about all the sanctions that we have done over the years. And I can hardly think of any that have had a major impact. We had sanctions against Iran. They still were building nuclear weapons. We've had sanctions against Russia. China is a huge buyer of oil. India is going to start buying with rupees instead of dollars. And what we do, you know, people worry about the dollar losing its reserve currency status. I'm not a big worrier of that. I think in my lifetime it will never happen. But every time we put sanctions on, we drive people to look for alternative ways of getting business done in the world. And we can't stop India from doing business with Russia. We can't stop China from doing business with Russia. So these sanctions actually can work against us in the longer run. And that's one of my big worries. So,
I don't think that we've ever really tried truly forceful sanctions, not with Iran. There's whatever Joe Biden was doing, they didn't enforce sanctions.
Right.
They allowed Iran to export record amounts of oil to China.
Right.
They just turned a blind eye, and Iran was bringing in how many billions of dollars did
Right.
Iran bring in?
yeah, we made a
So-
deal with them, then we took it back, then we made another deal, and we took it back. I mean,
So I just want to finish. So our oil and gas production right now is at a record, natural gas. And one thing, and Larry Kudlow talked about this on Friday, you look at the SWIFT messaging ledger, Russian entities have not been kicked off of the SWIFT messaging ledger. We can look and see exactly who Russia does business with.
Right.
You kick Russia and every entity off, and you also cut off Russian entities, and anyone who's doing business with Russia from the Federal Reserve wire. So not only can you not transact business, you can't even you're kicked off the actual payment system.
Right. Yep.
So we've never even taken that step, have we? Not in my memory, we haven't.
Yeah.
There's a lot that we could do.
Oh, I believe
There's
that.
$300 billion in their central bank reserves that's in Europe, confiscated.
Well, we're putting
Pulling our
the screws to India on tariffs right now too, and India's not happy about it. And apparently, we were going to send a trade rep there. And that's not going to happen. So
Europe
tariffs
needs
are
to stop buying refined product from India. That's Russian oil refined into fuel.
Jerry.
I said we're pulling our punches, I think is the point that Dagan's making. We've got a lot of power. We're not using it, that we could force Russia to do what we want them to do here. I think the president's taking a very measured approach to this. He always gets accused of being like ham-fisted and nasty, but he's really taking a measured approach here, trying to coax Russia into doing the right thing.
Well, and John, I think he's got these European leaders in the Oval Office and meeting here at the White House. I mean, maybe time for a little coaxing or tough talk on them as well, economically speaking. Dagan made the point about buying oil from India that comes from Russia. You've got to get some kind of alignment